Hey, FemFreak radio heads. Pandemic Summer 2.0 has wound down. Now that it's fall, it's time for you to snuggle up with the feminist pop culture analysis you can only get from your good friends at Feminist Frequency Radio. And you know what would make everything even more cozy? Cuddling up with the community of listeners and supporters over on Patreon. Subscribers get early access to new episodes, bonus content, merch discounts, listener polls, and the occasional surprise treat. But when you sign up on Patreon, you won't just be supporting our feminist media analysis. You'll also be giving real, tangible support to our incredible games and online harassment hotline, which is our free, confidential, text message-based emotional support hotline. Head on over to patreon.com/femfreak to sign up now.
I don't know if we can look at these as individual movies anymore. Yeah. They're just they're parts of a franchise. They're like chapter this.
But that is a problem. Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Anita Sarkeesian, and my fellow deviant, Ebony Adams, is busy trying to murder Eternals and couldn't make it today, but that's okay, because I've got some fantastic guests joining me to talk about the latest installment in the very tired and everyone is over at MCU, Eternals. Stay tuned. I am joined by Teddy Dief, longtime regular guest who comes on when I desperately need someone to come on the podcast.
Hello.
What's up, Teddy?
What is it? November?
It sure is.
I've seen a bunch of bad superhero movies all in a row this month.
You sure have.
On a roll. Yeah.
For folks who might be tuning into this episode for the very first time, I have no fucking idea why you're here. What do you do, Teddy? Who are you?
Oh, hi. I'm a game designer and director. I make things. I made a game called Hyper Light Drifter, and now I'm working on a project called We Are OFK, which is a game, music biopic about the band OFK.
Great. It's like you've said that 500 times.
I'm still working on it. Still massaging it.
And I'm super excited to have Kim Belair back after many years. You were on a very long time ago. I remember recording with you at GDC, actually.
Yeah, in person, I think in 2019, maybe?
2020. It was older than that. Maybe 2018?
Oh, no. It may well have been.
It was a while ago.
Yeah,
Anyways,
it may have been 2018.
You were on for the Batman Returns episode, which is a great episode. Y'all should go back and listen to it. I thought that was fantastic. Anyways, Kim, hello.
Hello.
Who are you? What do you do? How would you like people to know you?
I'm the CEO of Sweet Baby Inc. We're a narrative development company, so my day job is writing, story consultation, narrative design, all that stuff. We have a company of very, very cool and very kind people around us.
Nice.
And we work on a lot of video games. I should mention the part about all the games.
All the games. So many. Well, how's everyone's day? I feel like everyone's kind of having a shitty day. I don't know. Like, I had a breakdown on the beach this morning, and another friend of mine is having a rough morning, and Teddy, you're having a rough morning.
I spent my morning at FedEx.
How was that? Did you end up on a ship in the ocean on an island?
Oh, I wish. I love a Castaway reference.
I've never seen Castaway. We were just talking about it the other day.
You summed it up.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. No, I had a great time to be fair, I had a great time at FedEx. The FedEx folks were very helpful and quick and amazing. So
wonderful.
Shout out to the FedEx in Hollywood.
Shout out to them indeed.
How's
Montreal?
I'm on the East Coast, so I'm 3 hours ahead, and it has not. The news is it hasn't gotten better. Like, the next 3 hours, do not expect things to get much better. It's been an anxiety Monday. One of those, like, those times when you kind of hit it going, all right, today I'm going to get a ton of stuff done. And you know in the back of your mind, that's not true. But instead of, like, allowing yourself, like, okay, I'm going to get a little bit done, you kind of, like, give yourself this carrot on a stick of productivity. And then at the end of it, you're like, well, didn't do all that stuff I knew I was never going to do. I'm going to beat myself up a little bit for it, though, at the end of the day, and then try it all over tomorrow. I'm going to make sure that I get nice and exhausted.
This podcast is a gift to me because I woke up in the same way. I was like, I'm going to get stuff done. And then I was like, my brain's not working. It's not happening. It's not happening. And then I got a text from Anita being like, hey, since we're going to talk about another bad movie, do you want to be on? Because that's the ones that you're on. And I was like, yes, great. I can feel productive by this.
This morning, Ebony was like, I can't make it. And I was like, fuck, who else has seen? I was like, nobody I know has watched this movie.
No.
And so I dragged Teddy to go see it with me last week. And so I was like, I know one person who's seen it. Yeah, I mean, my day is fine. My problem, so I've been on vacation for 2 weeks. Like I've just took 2 weeks off work. This is my first day back. And I had sent my computer in to get fixed because there was like a little issue with it that like didn't make it impossible to work on, but like, you know, when or can you ever be away from your computer long enough to send it in, you know, to like fix a hardware problem? So when I got it back, I didn't realize that they had wiped the whole thing. So today when I sat down to work being like, yeah, gonna look through 500 emails, it's gonna be great. It just was like, nope, it's gonna take 7 hours to to back up. And so
God.
I've just been sitting around like puttering in my office, like tidying up and being like, checking emails on my phone. So that's how my day has been going.
Okay, well, that wins so far, I think. It's
not bad.
No,
it's just like
that's intense, though. It's intense.
It feels a little bit like, should I just have an extra vacation day because I can't fucking do anything today? But, you know, it's great. I'm easing back in. We're
going to turn our days around live on this podcast.
Yeah.
Honestly,
this podcast
yes.
is going to give us life.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about this movie. All right, so because my brain is still in vacation mode, and because Ebony usually writes the scripts, and because my computer didn't work, so many reasons, I literally just stole the blurb about this movie from IMDb. So following the events of Avengers Endgame, an unexpected tragedy forces the Eternals, ancient aliens who have been living on Earth in secret for thousands of years, out of the shadows to reunite against mankind. How dare they, mankind? Ugh. Mankind's most ancient enemy, the Deviants. That's Eternals. Pretty much sums it up. Okay, I would like to start by saying that this movie fucking sucked and I'm really sad about it. Like more so than some of the other Marvel movies. Partly because Chloé Zhao, which we've talked about on this podcast, we've done an episode on Nomadland, was the director for it. She won, Nomadland won Best Picture at the 2020 Oscars. Is 2020? It was earlier this year. It was this year's Oscars. And Chloe has a really, you know, like her she also made The Rider. She has a very like soulful filmmaking style. And I was like, okay, like, you know, how do you bring that to Marvel, right? What does that look like in this space? And it didn't. You don't apparently.
Yeah.
Like, and it's disappointing because I think that some of the other directors who have very iconic styles that have made Marvel movies have brought their style to it, right? So Taika Waititi did
Ragnarok.
Thank you. I'm hitting Teddy on the shoulder, being like, say the words for me. Which, granted, I didn't love that movie, but it was very like a distinct style. And the other one that I'm thinking of is
Guardians of the Galaxy?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
James
that's
Gunn.
true.
Had a very distinct style. And look, I'll even say, like, I know we don't, like, Joss is a not good human, but Joss Whedon's Avengers, like, really
It feels like a
was
Joss
very
Whedon.
Joss Whedon. Yeah. So this was really surprising to me that it just felt like nothing. Like, it felt like bland nothingness.
Yeah, so I want to go back for a second to like, I want to make it one disclaimer here, and it's that like in the past 3 to 6 months at least, I have found more of an appreciation of like some Marvel movies than I've ever had. So I'm not coming in purely as a hater because I think what I've been thinking about a lot these past couple months is like, I work on video games, and a lot of the time I work on AAA video games, right? So there's like very big, ambitious project, and a lot of the time it's the work of thousands of people distributed to make this huge behemoth of a thing that may or may not show the original intent of the many, many artists and talents involved, right? And I think that while I think that the construct of Disney is like is marching us into ruin, I can at least look and go, I can watch some Marvel movies and think, man, some real big comic book fans got to write this. Someone, like you can tell, for example, that someone had to do a big deck to decide what the Eternals god font would look like, what the god style, what all the circles would mean and would look like. And I know that person probably had a great time, so I can appreciate elements like that, right? And so when I was reading about the Eternals, people were like, I was misled actually a little bit, because people were like, it's just a video game movie. It's just a big video game I'm looking on the screen. And so when I watched it, my thought was, I wish it had been more of one. Like, it wasn't, because I think that like it would have been more successful if it had not tried to be that more mature, contemplative thing that Marvel's not really ready for. I don't think that the content is as yet at the point where we can get there as much as I'd like it to be.
I don't even feel, well, okay, I want to say one thing really quick, is that I suspect, so Chloé Zhao is a amazing director, like an amazing filmmaker. I suspect that something went asunder somewhere, right? Like that studio notes, too many pots, hands in the pot, blah, whatever the analogy is. Like, I can't imagine that she thinks that this is a good movie.
No,
right?
I don't think she does.
No, and we will never know that. So I do want to just put that out there. Like, I'm not blaming her. Like, you know,
No.
I mean, like, I feel like when movies are bad, the people who make them know, like, they kind of know that they're bad, but they can't go out and say, "Hey, here's where things got messed up."
I screwed it up.
Yeah, or like,
or
hey,
they
the
screwed it up
screenplay
for
had
me.
like 500 people attached to it, or it was trashed before I got it, and I did the best that I could to resuscitate it. You know, like, there's all of those elements. So I do want to give credit to like filmmakers who, you know, we don't know what happened here.
I think that's the issue is more that I think Marvel makes a mistake by trying to by kind of not simultaneously giving freedom and constraints. I feel like this movie feels like a process problem as well, because it feels like I don't think that the Marvel universe, because it's so like scripted and linear and milestone based, I don't think it has room to really truly let anyone like work their vision out, right? I feel like if they had said, hey, you can do whatever you want with this space, do it, I think she would have made something pretty great. Or if they had made something that was purely mechanical, an action movie to serve the purpose of the next one, that could have been enjoyable in a different way. But I feel like instead they kind of want to have their cake and eat it too, right? It's like, we want to have that slow contemplative movie, but we also want to have the quippy action movie. So we're not going to choose either one. And I think like there's no lack of talent here. But there's a lack of fit, you know?
Yeah, it's difficult to know, right? Like you're saying, like it's difficult to know what could have gone wrong in that process, but also important to note that like there is an entirely different skill sets with almost disconnected Venn diagrams of like being a filmmaker and being a director of a large film and being a director of a large film in such a corporate construct. And like the movie, even from script, like really reeks of heavy-handed control in a way that a lot of the other, like you were talking about, sort of directors with strong styles, their films did not. It felt like they had more breathing room and more trust from the studio that maybe Chloe did not. Like, for example, early in the movie when the monsters first attack, the thing that shouted it out to me, screamed it, was that they like hit the monster with a blast and then it heals itself. Like, very visually, it just like holds a hand up to itself and heals itself. And then some character goes, "Did it just heal itself?" And then 15 seconds later, when the fight is over, the first thing they do is have a conversation. They go, "I think it just healed itself." And then someone else goes, "They didn't used to be able to do that." And like, these are all lines that feel like script doctoring, that feel like not trusting an audience, which is not something that like an experienced director like Chloé Zhao would do.
No, it feels like they put a test audience and they were like, "Did you understand that?" And they were like, "We didn't understand that it was healing itself. Let's overcorrect to make sure they really get that beat."
And the thing is, like, this is being touted as the most diverse Marvel movie, and it has all this representation in it, and like it just like hurts my soul when those movies are this bad, because there are people who will take this and run with it and be like, well, that's why they need to be all white dudes to be entertaining, when like that's not actually the issue here. So getting into it a little bit, I'm really disappointed. I mean, I'm really disappointed in this whole fucking movie, to be honest. Like, but some big things. There's an incredible cast here. Like, these actors, a lot of them
Stunning
are
cast.
wonderful.
Great stuff.
So you look at someone like Angelina Jolie, who like, look, Angelina Jolie does not just come out for anything anymore, right? Like she's very intentional about the work that she does. And I feel like making her, who, you know, I have very fond feelings about her as like a movie, like, you know, she's like
she's a movie star.
Unlike, we don't really have movie stars like her anymore, right? And I feel like she was just cast aside as this like helpless, can't control herself, quote unquote, crazy woman. And the whole film was just about like having this man have to guard her so that she doesn't like fall into darkness. And I'm like, what a waste of this actor who is like, has such like she has such camera presence. It felt, that was one thing that I was surprised by. And then like, Selma Hayek, like you're gonna kill her off right away and like have her come in and flashback. Like it was just, I was really stunned by some of the choices on who to focus on and what their little mini story arcs would be.
I think, yeah. So on the Selma Hayek, I didn't mind that because I felt like, oh, I was surprised. Like that at least caught me off guard. And I think that the bill, it's one of those like you've billed me a star and now you're killing them off. So that's an interesting idea. I feel like the thing with casting someone like Angelina or casting any of these things at this point is that you're not casting her for this. You're casting her for the thing she's going to do in 3 or 4 movies. And that's what also makes it so weird is that we have like bit parts. Like you can get someone to show up for a day because in 3 movies, they're going to show up for a year, right? Like, and that's the weirdness of it. So you get all these powerhouse actors coming in to do almost nothing because it's their setup for a cooler future.
That's a great point. Like, case in point is I don't remember the actor's name, but like Jon Snow. You're like, what the fuck is Jon Snow doing in here? It's like the plucky boyfriend who's on screen for 5 minutes.
Yeah, and you're like, King Arthur. That's going to be a guy. Like, that's always... And that, I think, is what makes it interesting is that you can't, I don't know if we can look at these as movies, as individual movies anymore. Yeah. They're just, they're parts of a franchise. They're like chapter this.
But that is a problem. And I think there's a difference between having Kit Harington come on at the beginning and the end and then have the post-credit sequence and there's whatever the King Arthur shit is. I don't know how that fits into Marvel, but it's clearly that kind of a sword. And that will be relevant in like another movie coming forward. Like Angelina Jolie's character is a part of the Eternals and is a part of the crew. And so while I think your point is really interesting and valid, I am a little bit hesitant to give them that much credit because like they needed to do more. And here's another thing actually about this is that the Avengers, before we got the Avengers movie, we got individual movies of a lot of them. We built up those characters long before we like united them. So because in an ensemble, it's very hard to give enough attention to each character to make them feel whole. So they're trying to build a franchise around the Eternals, a la the Avengers, without doing any of the prep work that they needed to do for that.
Which brings me to my hottest take. I think the movie should have had no flashbacks.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think that the movie, there's a much more decent movie in there if you cut every flashback and you make them the Now You See Me crew or Ocean's 11, or you make it a mystery because for me, what's interesting about the movie and what could be fun is that pitch of a bunch of gods or aliens or whatever we want to, like a bunch of things who we cannot. I think like what are they robots? Like, do we want to call them robots? A bunch of gods.
Sure.
I'm going to go with gods. A bunch of gods exist secretly on the planet for many, many years, eternally. Suddenly, one of them is murdered. We have to get the gang back together and find out if our old nemesis is back. So we go individually to try to find them and then solve this problem together, only to find out that the killer was among us. Like, that's a great pitch and a really fun movie.
So much better.
But every time they flash back and tried to make me care about Icarus, I was so mad.
And you could do so much more character development this way.
This is a bad robot.
I don't know if it was the cause, but it was another thing that reeked of like weird edits where they were like, you need to do a flashback to show them in love. And they did that like 15-minute flashback after we'd been in present time that didn't really, like you said, didn't make us care about Icarus, didn't really make us see that Icarus and Circe were connected.
No, I leaned over to my partner the second Icarus appeared, and I was like, I loathe this person. I was like, I will not have, like, I cannot deal, like, from the jump, I thought they're going to really want me to care about this. And I can't do that.
And actually, here's another point, too, about the sort of, like, quote unquote diverse cast, is it was all about this white dude. Like, you still had all of these characters of color, you had character with disability, you had, like, and it's still centered around this fucking emo ass white dude.
Yes. And how sad he was that he hurt everyone else. Like, I did a bad thing. That's really hard for me.
The other thing too is that, like, so he was really annoying. Yeah, I think I didn't hate him as much as you did, though. But the where did my brain just go? So he does this whole thing, and he's like, like, shocking. It's the person who's been among us all along, like you just said. And then there's no opportunity for redemption, which makes me really mad in terms of, like, value systems, that he just flies himself into the fucking sun. And I was like, I was cackling in the movie theater being like, are you fucking kidding me? And so, like, funny, whatever, die. I don't give a shit about you. But also, I want narratives where we see redemption, where we see opportunities for growth and change and, like, whatever. Then there's so few of them, and, like, they need to band together, that I thought that was just a waste. That might come from comic books, right? Like, that might be part of, like, comic book lore of Eternals or whatever, but I still think it was a shit move.
I don't know if I ever would have forgiven him, though. I think that the degree of that and, like, the religious zeal that caused him to do it would be very hard for me to untangle at the end from him as a character, which is not, here's the thing. It is hilarious that he just blasted himself directly into the sun to live up to specifically being called Icarus. Like, he's like, this is
so
how I'm
stupid.
going to do that.
But he could go Batman style away to a fucking monastery and then, like, spend another 5,000 years, like, working on himself and, like,
to be
being
fair,
better,
We don't know he isn't doing that, because I actually don't know the character of Icarus, and there may very well be an origin story where he comes back from the sun and is really good.
Fuck.
But I think I'm tired of bad Superman. I don't think we've had a good enough Superman yet to have so many takes. Like, at this point, we have cynical Superman, and then we have evil Superman as our sole, like, depiction of Superman. And we all, or the worst of us, complain, I think, all the time about how, like, nobody wants to see, like, a Superman who's, like, a Boy Scout or a nice guy, but instead we have all these takes on Superman, but we can't point to an example of him where he's like, oh, here's a big successful recent film where we've gone too far into the earnest hero.
Yeah, it's like, what are we running from? It's
like, Captain America and Thor, honestly, are the closest we have right now.
And we've talked about this recently on the podcast. Actually, we talked about this on the James Bond episode, about how everything needs to get rebooted as dark and gritty and anti-hero. And it's like, there should be more room for, like, good, like, challenged,
second round,
but good. And Spider-Man, I think, is maybe one of the only examples of, like, he's still very wholesome, and
Agreed.
And maybe that's because he's a kid and he can be, like, maybe there's more liberty for that. But I'm really tired of, like, and again, we have the new Batman that came out. That's also the dark brooding. Like,
yes,
Batman sucks. Like, let's be honest.
We keep going down. Like, Batman
we're
Begins was the gritty reboot of the Thing, and now our gritty reboot is grittier than the last gritty reboot.
And I want a little bit more of the, like, campy comic book shit back, right? I want a little bit more of, like, less, like, stop taking yourself so fucking seriously,
Yeah, like, quick nerdy aside while we're on the topic of Superman, I'm just remembering, didn't they make a Superman joke in this movie?
Yes, they did.
Which is wild, because it's not a DC property. And I'm like, I guess Superman is a generic name. No, the movie is not a DC property. Sorry. Yeah.
No, because he then says Clark as well. So it is to identify him directly as the superhero, which you're allowed to do, and I think but it's also, like, it's the joke you expect to have there because this guy is evil Superman, and they only put it in. It feels like they put it in to lampshade the fact that he's just Superman.
Yeah, he even
You know,
fucking flies like Superman, except he floats like asshole Superman. You know, he's got that, like
This
chest
man
out.
is
He's like,
not super at all. I did not like Icarus.
Yeah, no, I mean, oh god.
And-
I got really tired of the big speeches about humanity and humans and and like I was like, really? You're gonna do this 25 times? Didn't we just do like this movie is made up of the same thing repeated over and over and over again in a lot of ways. And you're just like, you know, when you were talking about editing, like the time travel, I was like, whoa, this is a flashback. Like the editing wasn't even done well, like clearly, so you knew.
Worst aspect of the film is when they go back in time and they have the same jokes, cadence, and delivery that they do now.
And they haven't changed in
They haven't changed in 5 years. Big punch. If I could punch this up, one of the things would be create a language for them, or at least have them speaking something very, very old in those original flashbacks. But also, my second note, cut the flashbacks.
Yeah, totally.
So
I was actually
only have
wondering.
them in the modern day.
I was like, okay, so one of the characters uses sign language, and I was like, what sign language is this? Like, there are lots of different sign languages. So what, like, and that doesn't really matter in terms of like.
It only matters in the moment where she gestures for time, and she's pointing to a watch. And I thought about it, and I was like, I don't think that would be the point of reference at that point because she grew up in a time before watches were on your wrist.
Yeah, and also you're like, well, is her sign language like from when? Because if she always was deaf, then like as an alien robot thing, you know what I mean? Like it just I'm like, cool. This is like wedged in diversity as opposed to like really this thoughtful character. And granted, I don't know American Sign Language, so I can't like look at it and be like, that's what they use. But I'm guessing that that's probably what they use.
I believe it is. I believe that's what I saw. I looked it up real quick after the movie.
And then so for what you're saying is I would expect her sign language to change over time. Right?
Yes.
Like depending on where she ends up and where she's living in their like purgatory state.
She's also a strong example of a character that gets like we haven't reached it yet, but the part where Kumail Nanjiani just exits the movie.
He just
like,
fucking leaves and like is not even in the end battle scene. He's like, peace out, I'm gonna go do my film career some more. And you're like, what?
It's just the movie is such a strange example of time mismanagement where like they have characters they have to completely shelve, including the sign language character who just like has been living underground apparently. So that they don't have to write her into the story for a while,
but
and yet we have these long.
She's kept up enough to know about DVDs, but not Blu-rays. Like,
right?
and doing like you all have both said, like doing an ensemble cast movie and one that has to compete with the expectations of the Avengers, which had a lot of movies to establish these characters. Like, you cannot fucking afford to waste time. And even the Avengers, like, I remember at the time when they gave that film to Joss Whedon, it was like, oh, because he does ensemble, and we need someone who can do that because it's really fucking hard. And some other movie had recently dropped the ball on doing ensemble. So like the fact that it's hard, the fact that you have a limited amount of time and that they're wasting time with the flashbacks so that they then have to bench characters, it just felt like a really weird, misuse of their time.
Yeah, there's no reason to have shown that Hiroshima scene. Like,
dude.
Which we need to talk about because it was wild. Like, not only, like, okay, no, we don't, outside of, in the Marvel universe, we don't need to show the aftermath of Hiroshima. Like, one. Mm-hmm. Two, we shouldn't have the one guy who feels really bad about it be our sole black gay character in the film and have him be like, wow, I can't believe this happened. And three, it serves no purpose that them going to his house, confronting him about why he left, and him simply saying, Hiroshima, 1945, I'm not going back. Done. Instantly, you understand why he did it. You have gestured to the idea of technology is bad and I'm scared of it. But you didn't have to do it. And then my fourth note is don't do it at all. But I'm trying to just punch up because a lot of my notes would otherwise be delete. Just delete it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it felt not only ineffective, but also kind of like you felt kind of offended as an audience member. Like, deeply. In a movie that's already not trusting you, for it to take basically a cheap shot to be like, we're going to use the imagery of something that we know, they may as well have done something with the towers as well, with the World Trade Center. It's like, we're going to use this because we're failing to get the impact we want. and this is a shortcut.
Yeah, it was such a brutal moment. Like, I was just gonna say, like, it's so wild also because even if I say, okay, that was the moment, if I'm gonna go on a God scheme of things for 7,000 years, why would that be the straw? Like, right. And I mean that very sincerely. Like, I understand how the magnitude for us in the last century, right? But that was not the first tragedy, or that was not the first loss of life. Maybe in an instant, yes, but like, he should have seen technology's done a lot worse things. And frankly, like the rate at which it's destroying the fabric of our minds right now in various ways should also be of his concern. Like, it's very pick and choose about what these supposed gods believe is a tragedy for humanity, because if nothing hit until 1945 and these people are 5,000 years old, I would argue they should have developed empathy very, very early.
And shouldn't the last straw have been Facebook? They should have had him in Palo Alto outside
I was
on the
wondering
curb.
Like this is also bad. And like, they kind of have a fix, I guess, for global warming in the end, but they don't talk about like that's the scale at which one might expect a god to see the earth, right? It is not a localized destruction of many small people. It is the earth itself, this birthing unit for our future, is being actively destroyed by the little ants that we've put on it.
Well, that's the topic that the movie keeps trying to bang its head against and never hits, and does so again with wasted time, where they're constantly being like, have you heard of the trolley problem? And like, did you know that it's a lot of lives versus a few lives? Yeah. And like, what if they must have gone through that beat 5 different times in dialogue. If we kill this, whatever it's called, the time monster, like billions of lives will never be created, but we'll save Earth. And what do we do?
In that way, the movie is pro-choice. I did think that. I did think about that, about the fact that the whole thing is that they are trying to birth something that ultimately will ruin the place that it's from and destroy that, and has the potential to be something. And then the whole movie is them saying, no, it is more valuable to preserve the lives that we have than to destroy them all on the hope of something else. These people, I did have that thought. I'm like, is there this? But I really appreciate your point there. Like, I think a lot of what they were doing was, you can see what they were trying to get at. But I think if they had removed the amount of times they draw attention to that trolley problem, they all would have felt more like gods. Because I think that the movie was strongest when they have like a collective love for people and an individual one, but can also very easily like kill or get people out of the way, or like with Druig, right? What he's doing is objectively wrong, but you can understand why to a god that's a positive move. And I actually really liked that about him, because I'm like, this is how a god would act when it is upset, because humans, he's trying to keep them as pets because he's worried about them.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated what a dark thing that is, but to a god it wouldn't be, because we keep animals the same way. And I wish that they had kind of leaned more into the inhumanity of these gods to make their moments of humanity more remarkable.
Yeah, and instead they kind of undermine those really salient moments with his character by being like, oh, he's a risk. Like he's the firebrand. He's the Raphael of this cast who's going to go away. Where it's like, really, he's hitting the note most accurately, and the rest of these characters are just collaborators without any sort of godly quandary. Like there's no interesting philosophical question around to finger gun or not finger gun.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. Like that it's not good. And also I think but what is interesting about the movie and what makes it all the more frustrating is that you can tell that there is some competent writing and some nice character moments in it. Like there are some good lines. There are moments where I do feel for the two characters here. Like even Angelina Jolie when she's telling Cersei to get up. I loved the plainness of the line where she just says like, Cersei, get up. Like that's it, because that's like it's a very nice moment. And what these creators and these content creators at Marvel are good at is isolated moments like that. They're very good at knowing what's going to get you that little.
And that's kind of what, Teddy, you were saying at the beginning of like, there's too much. I mean, there's so much exposition, first of all,
Yes.
but also like there's just a lot of unnecessary dialogue because they don't trust the audience. And so I agree. I feel like let's cut out half of the dialogue
Yep.
and just let the movements and the motion go. I do think I was talking to a friend about how like Chloé Zhao's really, really good at working with non-actors. That's one of the things that she is spectacular at, right? So she'll often have like an actor as the main character and then have a bunch of non-actors, which like, God, I can't even imagine how difficult it is to get performances out of non-actors, right? And so I'm wondering if there's something that fell in this, because I don't know if she's ever worked with, I mean, nothing that we've seen publicly with established actors. I wonder if there's also a piece of that because the performances were good, but like as a whole, the movie kind of it was very void in a lot of ways and it didn't feel cohesive. So like if you got a good performance in one sort of aspect of it, it didn't like transition well into other scenes or other places. Like it didn't feel cohesive or it felt like too dramatic and the tone was like in that way it was kind of video gamey, to be honest, where you're just like you're kind of going up and down in these different places that don't really like you. The movie, okay, another thought, because I've just transitioned into this other thought, which you could respond to if you want. But the movie was asking us to feel a lot more than there was reason to.
Yes.
Right? It kept building these big emotional moments, and you're like, but I'm not with you. Like, this isn't happening. And I think the reason I connected that is because I'm like, the performances were so like big in parts that I was like, what? But why? Like, you're not. There's no reason. You've given me no reason to give a shit about any of these people.
No, because nothing's happened. I think that's the thing. That first flashback is like 20 minutes long. Like the first time after the initial prologue one, when we go into it, once we go back, we have like 20, 25 minutes in there. And it slows the action of the movie down so much and then basically leaves you like, well, what matters now? Like, I think at any given time, it's very hard to understand what matters now because they were using flashbacks to bolster it and then said, now that you know this is going to happen. But in the moment, those two characters didn't actually move forward at all. They just remembered something.
Yeah, and I'm realizing that not only failed to create a stronger bond between Icarus and Cersei, but also failed to make us care about Salma Hayek's character, who, like Anita, what you were just saying made me think of the scene where Icarus kills her is like this very drawn out, again, weird micro flashback to like 6 days earlier. And the moment they flash back, you're like, yeah, I hate this guy. He's an asshole. He killed her. Okay, I get it. And then you have to watch a 15-minute flashback of like this, we're going to have the score really try to hit you emotionally. And it's going to feel like this betrayal because she's standing by a cliff and he pushes her. And it's like, no shit. Like, why?
Sprite conjures that image of Ajax dancing in the kitchen with her after she dies. She like conjures an image to show like, this is how we spent the last time. Why not show me that instead of the flashback to 100 years ago where she's not doing anything? Like,
also
that would have been really nice.
Mm-hmm. Sprite is like, first of all, that wig, I'm really bummed out, but he's not on this episode to talk about how fucking bad that wig was. But neither of you understand this reference. Ebony talks about wigs a lot.
Well, I was going to say, I didn't mind Sprite's hair.
But so they're like the Interview with the Vampire style, I'm a kid forever and it sucks kind of vibes. Like, that's interesting, but they didn't do anything with it. And then all of a sudden she's in love with Icarus and like she like turns on everyone because she's in love with Icarus and can never have him because she's a child. But she's not a child, but she looks like a child. And so it's this whole like, because love, which is the trope I hate the most out of all the fucking tropes. Like,
and then they dare to have Kingo, or is it Kingo who's able to see it happening?
See what? What are you talking about?
There's one character who's like, you can tell that she's in love. Like,
oh yeah, isn't it Kumail's character?
Yeah, I think that's him, right?
Maybe. I don't.
Yeah.
Honestly, I had such a hard time even remembering anything.
It's right before he
movie.
just leaves. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's kind of like, yeah, I can clearly see that this is the problem. Like, and it feels like he only says that to make the audience feel like, yeah, I saw that too, when there was actually nothing. And like, one, it's weird and bad that they just introduced that element. And two, so they did do a redemptive thing for her, right? But they didn't really. They kind of just were like, kind of messed up what you did back there. What do you want? Like, what's going to stop you from doing this again? And then she was like, make me a person. I'm like, all right.
Make me a real boy.
Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know. I didn't.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, and it's also just too bad that like that plot, they really 100%ed the getting the gender stuff wrong. Like every like woman's relationship with every other woman is like centered around a guy, and even towards the end, like the big bad becomes Icarus, and then the big hero at first becomes the Irish kid. They're like, oh, you're our hope, and then he has to say like, I'm gonna pass the baton to Gemma Chan.
Which I do want to say, I really like Gemma Chen as an actor. Like, I enjoy her a lot.
She's
in the things
stunning.
I've seen her in. What?
I thought, throughout the movie, I thought, wow, she's stunning.
She's gorgeous. So if you've watched Humans, she plays like one of the main android characters that becomes sentient. And it's like, yeah, you look like you were made from a magical factory machine. But she also has the thing that I think is really is she is beautiful, but she also has this like deep warmth about her and her performances and who she is, which is great for this character. But like it just again felt wasted to me in that like, you know, I wanted like she's all of a sudden in charge now, and like this thing was passed on to her, and like the anger in which I wanted to see more like. You've been lied to this whole time. Like I wanted to see more of that like rage, and like instead it was like, I'm gonna do this thing that's a little bit hard. Who's in with me?
She turned that creature into a tree. She turned it into a tree, which is, I will say, one of the best like Marvel deaths. Like just stuff. Like cool. it was very Annihilation. I dug it. I don't really understand. I don't fundamentally understand how she did that or what like. I get it from like she can transmute stuff. That's kind of what I got from it. But they didn't do a great job of like explaining, I think, how everything works, which also leads me back to my video game point is drop the cutscenes and the single-use backgrounds that we have in the flashbacks and replace it with like a tutorial for all of the mechanics in this movie. Because I genuinely think that their abilities and their powers, in the moments where I felt an understanding of how power A interacts with B to create C, I was like, oh, I can tell that someone worked this out and was very interested in how like these powers interact. But then by the time they do like the Unimind, I did not understand anything.
I didn't get that at all. It was like, she turned this thing into a tree. Holy shit, we're going to use that to fight our battle. And I was like, what? What is happening?
The thing in her chest, right? The thing that this relies on and the movie kind of turns on is the thing in her chest allows communication with the gods. It is an amplifier. And it is like a connection point between we as androids or robots or whatever we want to call the Eternals or aliens and the higher power. That for me makes perfect sense to be the tool at the end that you use as like the thing that you need. But they needed to introduce that idea with Ajax the first time we see it. It needs to be like, I will give this to you so that now I understand the whole time that when Gemma Chan gets the device, it can communicate with the god. But instead, they only reveal or explain that at the time when they're using it, which makes a 2-hour and 37-minute movie feel like they rushed the ending.
Yeah. Like you keep talking about it in the context of like how if they're going to make it a video game, make it a better video game or something. And that makes me think about we've talked about a lot about their uses of time and the objects they need to focus on, and they're focusing in the wrong places. And I feel like maybe the same is true of locations. Something I've been thinking about with this movie is that you could kind of tell, like Anita, you were saying when we started that not a lot of people we know have seen this movie, which is anecdotal. But for some reason, you could tell this movie was going to be what it was from the trailer. Yep. And I wonder if that's just because they didn't have a lot of visual fodder to work with to humanize it. Where like the locations that they choose to focus on are these big, huge sweeping plains or like the giant soulless ship, and they're always in these outfits that are very like Power Rangers and don't add any character. Like there wasn't a lot of use of location or any of their visual resources to humanize or to ground anything. It was just a lot of like gonna make you bored because there's so many huge video game concept art landscapes.
Yes, that's exactly it. It's those landscapes where you have like a tiny little person in it and a huge sweeping vista, and it's beautiful. It's very like there were a lot of times when I actually did go like, wow, the location is great. Like this is a really cool place. But I had no idea like what I was supposed to feel about it. And like that, but that video gamey feeling is like, yeah, I don't know what I can do in here. It feels empty and it feels like there's not.
And even some of the smaller locations that had that potential, like you were talking about the time when Sprite renders out that memory of her dancing with Selma Hayek in the cabin. And the cabin is another kind of squandered thing because like that cabin has no soul. You're like, where is this cabin? Like I compare it, maybe this is a weird comparison, but to like Hawkeye's cabin in the Avengers movies where like it's used to be like, oh, he's the family person. He's the like middle America, down home country. And you get that from like cabin and horses and the tone and the feeling of that space. And this cabin was also just like heartless, soulless. There wasn't any character to it. We didn't get to spend any time seeing what its meaning was. We just were on the porch.
Also, I don't like people didn't hate her. So why was she alone? It's not like she like whatever.
Well, I think everyone isolated, but they didn't because they had seen her a couple months earlier because Sprite had that memory. She wasn't alone. That was it. Like they did visit her.
Oh,
sometimes.
That's right.
Yeah.
But also that didn't do anything because you're alone. Like it's this long vista. She's clearly like hanging out by herself, and which is why she was able to be murdered.
Well, I think that's it, right? Like everyone's kind of like isolated, and I like the idea of these gods as if I saw you 50 years ago, I've seen you recently because my lifetime is infinite. Like, I think that isolation wouldn't feel to them like isolation because it's for them, the time scale is so off. And I think that's why I think the flashbacks don't work because it makes it feel like the Babylonian era happened just now instead of going go ahead.
Yes. Although I think that because they don't age, they do have to like be conscious of time in a different way because they have to restart their lives again, which they do mention with Sprite and why Icarus wanted to stop hanging out with Sprite because he was like, I don't want to move every 5 years because you're a child and it's weird, right? So even as an adult, they're still going to have to do that even though they didn't address it. Not that you're wrong. I just like I was thinking about
that's it. I think they mentioned actually, right? Because he mentioned that she still has to move, but the cadence is slower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the talking about removing the flashbacks and doing more with the powers, I think a really lovely way to have done that is to show what they are doing in the present day as like, like their powers could be integrated into the work that they're doing or into whatever it is that they like and landed on. And so you could use that as character development. You could use that as like what their powers are and how that integrates and all of that shit without all of this other crap. And like that would have been, I don't know. I think that would have been so much more interesting. And it also could have had, like you were saying, that sort of like Ocean's vibe, right? Where it's like you're building a crew coming together to like fight this
Everybody
thing.
loves
and the one person goes around. Everybody loves it. Who doesn't love a fucking heist movie?
Yeah, and that's what I think, like this movie should have felt like someone's killing us. I guess that's Watchmen I'm describing. But like someone's killing us, we have to get back together and look at this, and it's the first murder we've had. Let's pursue this line of thinking the whole way. And then you still get, because I do think it's fun to have a scene where you go back to like a god's house and you find out that he's made his house, like his home impenetrable out of concern.
Yeah.
Those little bits of magic are what I think are the most interesting show of their powers and a great place to like load up on mechanics to be like, okay, here's what they can all do.
Yeah, and that one house is one of the, like, maybe one of the few exceptions of like, oh, they're really trying to use the context of what this character's life has become. Like, they're trying to do that.
Which
Whereas
felt the most out of everybody in some way.
Like, I forgot until just this point in our conversation that Cersei's character was like a teacher of anthropology or something, and we never got it. Like, why? I mean, like, because she's old, but why her? And what was
same with Wonder Woman? I think in the DC universe right now, like she's also like she's like a museum curator. Because she's old, old. And I feel like that's the last thing I feel like if I would always want to be on the cutting edge.
All right, this fucking movie. I am in the bonus going to share with you the notes that I wrote to Teddy in during the movie because I was so mad. But, so stay tuned for the bonus. In the meantime, we're going to take a quick break and then we'll share some freakouts.
Hey there, podcast family. While you're enjoying the show today, why not head on over to Patreon and sign up to be part of the crew that makes the magic happen? That's right. When you become a subscriber, you offer us the help we need to keep making the show. So moonwalk on over to patreon.com/femfreak and sign up today. And now, back to the show.
What's your freak out?
Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us, but it's not the Eternals. That joke only worked in my head. All right, Kim, what do you got? What are you freaking out about?
Right now I'm playing Monster Train. And I can't stop. I didn't know anything about deck builders prior to the pandemic. And then my partner and I went shopping looking for like board games because it was the pandemic. And we're tired of talking. We did find something. So we got a deck builder. We asked like, well, what's the easiest one to onboard with? Like, what's the most fun? And then the very kind attendant was like, I'm sorry that it's Harry Potter. And and I was and that was exactly how he delivered it as well. He was like, "It's Harry Potter." He saw my face and he was like, "Look, I know," because he was instantly like, "I also do not like her, but it's the best one." So we learned on that, and then I started playing Slay the Spire, and now it's Monster Train. And I've realized that like I do a lot of story and narrative games all day, so a lot of the time I'm like, I want to read a new story, but it takes me a little bit more time to absorb it in a game. And what I'm really looking for in my current life is like a game I can play while listening to a podcast. That is like now the greatest part of my day, the greatest part of my life sometimes, where I'm like, I have this game, I can play it on quiet, put on a podcast episode that I love, and both my fore and back brain or whatever, or right and left are taken care of, and I can finally be okay. And so that's kind of what I'm freaking out, because I find that like life's too wild. For the past couple of years, life has been too wild. Work has been too wild. The world has been wilding out in a major way. And I think both anxiety and ADHD for myself have been like very, very intense. And this is something that like quiets all of the, like that dread that I'm constantly thinking about. Like it takes away that because I'm doing something creative or organizational and working with that, and also not letting my mind wander. And so I'm freaking out about Monster Train and the combination of that and podcast.
Nice. Awesome. Teddy, what do you got?
I'm also going to talk about games.
I love it.
We
never talk about games on this podcast anymore.
Has anyone raved about Unpacking yet on the podcast? So I've just started Unpacking. I get to play very few games because of hand injuries. Hooray. But Unpacking is this beautiful game. It's on a lot of platforms, but I'm playing it on Switch. That tells you the story of this character through the process of unpacking her possessions. So like taking them out of boxes and putting them in presumably new spaces. And I haven't finished it yet, but I'm loving it already because I can feel that it is a game that does not succumb to the pressures of, I don't want to say of scope creep, because every game gets scopier, and it does have a lot of like really deep dives into, it'll do sound design, like, it has a specific sound for putting this object on carpet and on a table and on the bed and on the pillow on the bed, because the point is that it's doing one thing, and it's doing it very well, and it's doing it to tell its story, and it resists the urge to do more, because you just can't afford to when you're small. And the developer, I believe, is Australian. But yeah, Unpacking, check it out. It's very, very sweet and heartfelt. And
yeah, I want to second that, actually.
Yeah,
I wanted to second
quick
that. Yeah,
to play, I will say. Like, I think it's a 4 to 6 hour experience, I think, for people.
Great. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I should like video games again. I've been reading a lot. I read 2 books on my vacation, but nothing that I like enough to share. But I just want to put that out there because I usually give a lot of book recommendations. I am going to freak out about how Teddy forced me to see Venom 2 in the theaters at like midnight, and I totally fell asleep. And the movie is fucking trash and awful. But I do want to say, so first of all, I didn't even know that Venom 1 ever came out. I didn't know anything about this. Like, it just kind of was not in my worldview. Don't really know the story of Venom, which was told to me in like 5 minutes, very briefly.
Oh, yeah.
And so Venom 2, I was shocked when it started because I was like, oh, it talks. Oh, it's goofy. Oh, Tom Hardy's fucking weird. Like, it was not at all what I expected. The movie was bad. I fell asleep. But Michelle Williams is so phenomenal of an actor that every time she was on screen, I was like, oh, what's happening? What's going on? Like, even in that terrible role in this terrible movie, it was just the power of good acting is really amazing. Is just what I would like to say.
And even without giving her that much material, like it had big Meg Ryan in Top Gun energy, where I don't know if you've seen that. I feel like Meg Ryan shows up in that movie and just the all the air gets sucked out of the room, and it's just all centered around her, just based on like her commitment to the character.
Wait, Meg Ryan's in Top Gun?
Yeah.
What?
She plays his Tom Cruise's wingman's partner. And she shows up to base
that's right.
well into the movie and just like Anyway, but more to your point.
That.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's it. My freak out
Is it
that.
good? Should I watch? Oh, sorry, not is it good?
No, go.
I know it's trash, but should I watch this trash?
Which one, Venom?
I've watched Venom. Should I watch Venom 2?
It's not as good. I mean, the first Venom is like kind of surprisingly like you're like, oh, this is pretty solid, and Venom 2 is less so. So I don't know. If you like Woody Harrelson and you really
I like Woody Harrelson, and it wasn't enough for me.
It was on.
Also, you and our friend
Tyler.
we went to see it with talked about how like they just had too much budget, so the CGI like lost some of the whimsy of it, right? Like where he was, instead of just talking to himself, they like showed a lot, like Venom came out physically a lot in times when you didn't really need it.
I think that's from the comics. I'm not that familiar, but yeah, the first one, if you like Kim, you've seen it. Like, there's a lot of like, oh, Venom's in his head, and they play that joke a lot and to great effect. And in this one, they do a lot more of like the Venom head just kind of becomes like a second head that comes out of his shoulder, so he's talking to it.
See a lot of that cosplay on TikTok. I know that.
I think it's common in I don't know, the visualizations in the comics. It's just. Yeah, that movie lost a lot of steam for a lot of reasons.
It sucked, y'all. Don't go see it. This is all I got to say. All right. You can submit your own freak out at feministfrequency.com/freakout. That's FREQOUT. Thank you all so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio. Teddy, thanks for coming on to yet another episode of Trash Movie Hour. How can people find you if they want to do such a thing?
You can find me in most social things at Teddy Dief, TEDDYDIEF. So please say hi. And OFK, our band, is OFK. You can find them on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you listen to music. And they're OFK Band on Twitter, Instagram, etc.
Great. Kim, where can folks find you?
I'm at Bagel of Death on Twitter and Instagram, and then Sweet Baby is Sweet Baby Inc. also on Twitter and Instagram.
Amazing. I am streaming on Feminist Frequency's Twitch channel this week. So if you want to check that out, it will be on Thursday night, 6:30 Pacific time. We stream every Thursday. I just happen to be streaming this Thursday. I think I'm going to play Garden Story. I don't remember. But yeah, I might be playing Garden Story, and the developers might come on and hang out with us. So if you are around and want to check that out, please do. And that's at twitch.tv/femfreak. All right, so we are off next week for American Thanksgiving, but we will be back on December 1st for an episode that I'm actually super excited about. We have The Unpregnant Director, which is on HBO Max. You should go watch it. Rachel Lee Goldenberg, and Daily Show co-founder or co-creator rather, and the director of the activist group Abortion Access Front, Liz Winstead. And we are going to talk about reproductive rights in the media, which I think is going to be amazing. So check that out. Our show is engineered by Rob Pera. Carrie Stimpson provides technical support. Artwork by Jamie Varon, and our intro music is by Phil Circus. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.